Hey everybody, I'm Scott Risley. I'm one of the pastors here at Dwell Community Church, and we're here to talk about Christmas. Christmas 2020. We finally made it. It's been quite a year, not the year any of us expected would happen. But you know what? I love Christmas. I've always loved Christmas, even before I had a family. Now that I have a wife and kids, two kids, one wife, of course. I love Christmas even more. And one of the things we've developed over the years is traditions that revolve around the holiday season. And one of those traditions is the very beginning of the Christmas season, and that would be the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And every year on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we gather together with friends and family to watch Ohio State beat Michigan in football. And we record this before the OSU-Michigan game, so I hope that tradition continues this year, though delayed by a couple of weeks. And then we go back and we set up our Christmas tree. And, we put on Christmas music. Christmas music is forbidden in our house outside of Christmas season. But during Christmas season, it's basically fair game within reason. And we put up the Christmas tree. Here's a shot of the kids when they were younger, hanging ornaments on the tree. Each year they would hang ornaments on the tree. We just let them do it. And so the bottom couple of feet of the tree would be ornaments, and the top several feet would be nothing. And you can see the age of the kids by how high the ornaments get on the tree. We also set up our Christmas village, which at this point has grown into more of a Christmas metropolis, with the addition of a house or two here or there each year. But then on Christmas Eve, another great family tradition is there's actually several events. Christmas Eve is set aside for just me and the kids. We've got extended family at other times. But on Christmas Eve, we start out with a very fabulous Christmas dinner. And on this Christmas dinner, anyone is allowed to have anything they want for dinner. There are zero constraints at all on the Christmas dinner. And so you can see a typical Christmas dinner here. We've got a perfectly cooked medium rare steak, asparagus, freshly baked bread, and of course, large family-sized boxes of sugar cereal. IBC root beer I can see there on the table. It's quite the evening. We also make a Christmas gingerbread house. Here's one of them we made a number of years ago. We often will then exchange gifts with just the immediate family gifts to kind of get outside of the craziness of the next morning. And also, what else do? We watch a Christmas movie. We watch usually Elf or something like that. So we've got these traditions that we look forward to. But, one of the things that we do also that I have really fond memories of is opening up the Bible and reading the Christmas story. And, of course, when the kids were little, we, and even pretty much today, we're reading out of kids' Bibles. And one of the things I was really struck by, we had a number of kids' Bibles over the years, is how profoundly they were able to communicate the Christmas story. And especially the time of seeming silence from God, the hundreds of years between the Old and the New Testament leading up to the birth of Christ, where God seemingly hadn't said anything, where his people were under cruel oppression by the Romans. This was a time of great suffering and pain and waiting that Christ was born into. Here's one of them, the Action Bible, one of our all-time favorites. They begin their New Testament with this little story called When in Rome. You can see the narrator panel. The mighty Roman Empire rules Palestine, the home of God's people, the Jews. The Romans have appointed Herod to govern Palestine for them. Herod is clever, but he's also cruel. The Jews hate him and the Roman officials who work for him. A Roman soldier goes up to an old man and says, "Here, old man, carry this for me." Roman soldiers were allowed to do this. This old man would carry it a mile for him. And the rest of the subsequent panels, they show the old man, the people watching with pity as he carries this burden for this Roman soldier. They show his family escorting him home in a tremendous amount of pain and putting him in bed. And then you see the old man begin to cry out to God. He remembers the time when God's people were free. He remembers the time long ago when King David sat on the throne. And God had promised that King David would one day have a son who would be an eternal ruler. And he says, "God, where are all your promises?" Another of our favorites was called the Big Picture Story Bible. And their New Testament begins with a story called Many Silent Years, and that's an understatement. It says, years passed without a single word from God. You ever felt like that? You ever felt like you're in a time when years passed without a single word from God? It says the years turned into many years, and many years turned into hundreds of years, and the great promises of God seemed to fade away. Israel became less important in the world. Other nations became great, strong nations. Powerful nations whose kings ruled over God's people. And one such king, it goes on to say, was named Caesar Augustus. And it's got Caesar and all of his pomp and his greatness. And he says, I'm going to number my people. I'm going to show the world how great I am. Caesar, the king of the world. Or so he thought. But then it says, there's something Caesar didn't know. What he did not know was that God, the world's true ruler, the king of the universe, was getting ready to show everyone how great he was. God was going to end his many years of silence. God was going to keep his promise of a forever king. Yes, God had promised long ago that a king would sit on the throne forever. A son of David. He would rule eternally. This was the Messiah. This was the anointed one. This was the promised one. And here we have a typical scene in ancient Israel. And what nobody knew is an angel was there telling a young girl named Mary that she was going to have a miraculous son and he would be the Messiah. And it finishes by saying, and you know how God was going to do this, not like Caesar, not proudly by counting all of his people, but humbly by becoming one of his people. In the power of his Spirit, God would bring his forever king into the world as a baby. Yes, Jesus, though being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the likeness of man. This is when that happened. And being found in appearance as a man, he continued. He was obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. But you know what it says? It was for this reason also that God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name. This is the message of Jesus. Last shall be first. You want to be the greatest, you become the servant of all. The low, you go low, and that's the exaltation happens after that. Humble yourself so God can exalt you. Jesus exemplified this. He gave us the model in his incarnation. And then he followed it up with his death on the cross. What this is capturing is exactly the prophecy of Isaiah. A prophecy about the Messiah that came 700 years before the birth of Christ. In Isaiah 9, Isaiah predicts this great time of oppression. Turned out to be at the hands of the Romans. And he says, nevertheless, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. What a great promise. You know, when does God move? I think about that question. I look back in the history of the Bible. I look back at my own life. And so often, there's a long period of darkness, a long period of despair, a long period of waiting, a long period where God seems like he is silent. And it feels so painful. And Isaiah says that time will not go on forever. It will not go on forever. He says the land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled. This is the land of Galilee where Jesus was born, the northern part of Israel. There will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Yes, that darkness. The light is even brighter when it comes in the darkness. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, the light will shine. Isaiah says, God, you will break the yoke of their slavery. And what did Jesus say? On the first sermon of his ministry, he says, the Father has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released. He says, Isaiah says, you will lift the heavy burden from their shoulders. And what did Jesus promise? He said, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And you will find rest for your souls. And the reason the darkness will be lifted is because a child is born to us. A son is given to us. That will be the solution. This is the promised one, the Son of David, the eternal Messiah. It says the government will rest upon his shoulders. No more corrupt world governments run by mere humans. He will carry the government of the world, and he will set things right. And what will he be called, the Son of David? He will be called Wonderful Counselor, because he's wonderful. Because he does wonderful things, because he'll do signs and wonders. And he's the counselor, because he's right there beside of his people, giving them direction, helping them through. He'll be called Mighty God. It's a Son of David, and yet he's God. No one knew that God would put on human flesh. He's the mighty one. No one is more mighty than he. He's omnipotent. The mightiest being becomes the Son. He's God. He's the everlasting Father, because he will last forever. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And he is the Father. Not just God, but also the Father that you always knew you should have had. The Father that every father on earth is a pale, dim comparison. Some of us are celebrating Christmas without a father for the first time this year. Know that there's an eternal Father who extends his grace to you. And finally, the Prince of Peace. He is the Prince, he is the ruler, and he will bring peace. Peace that humans could never bring. His government and its peace will never end. He's eternal. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. Finally, a ruler that's perfectly fair and just. And God says, in case you're wondering how certain this is, the passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. Couldn't get any more certain. Christmas 2020. This has been a hard year. This has been a hard year. For some of it's been harder than others, but people say, I'm really having a hard time. And I say, everybody's having a hard time. If you told me you weren't having a hard time, I would know you're lying. It's been hard. But Isaiah has a promise for you. Nevertheless, he says, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. Things will get better. Almost certainly in this life. But we know for certain, this life is so short. Heaven will be here soon. And then we do know what will go on forever, and that's eternal joy, eternal happiness in the presence of God. Laughter and the great reunion in perfect relationships, because a child has been born to us, Isaiah says. That is the reason for our hope in the darkness and the despair, and that is the light that shines in the darkness. The Christ child has been born. The unthinkable has happened, that God has put on human flesh, and he came to die for your sins. He offers you a free gift because of his death and resurrection on the cross. That gift is there. It's wrapped. He's handing it to you. But just because someone gives you a gift doesn't mean you receive it. You must receive that gift. Don't let it just sit there under the tree. Receive it, open it, and accept it as your own. A free gift from God the Son.